Would Zach Collaros leading the Winnipeg Blue Bombers into Mosaic Stadium be the biggest story in 20 years?
Well, always cheer for the angle when you do this for a living.
Right.
Or you do a sports talk show for a living. And who would have imagined that? That would be an amazing story, and there probably aren't enough words on the internet, and there's enough space on the internet to for everything that you'd want to say about that.
There's been some great stories. This one is right up there.
That would be just who would have thought it? It would add even more spice to a game that is going to have a lot of intrigue and a lot of importance. I would love to see that happen. I think, and there's also we'll never know what impact Zach Collaros could have had he been healthy for the playoffs last year. If you look at Zach Collaros' stats weren't spectacular. His performance wasn't spectacular. He beat Calgary twice as a Ryder starting quarterback. He won in Calgary last October and nearly threw for 400 yards. And Chris Jones had figured out Bo Levi Mitchell. Now, Zach Collaros plays for the Riders on November 11th of last year against Winnipeg instead of Brandon Bridge. Hard to imagine the Riders don't end up going to Calgary again. And then you've got Zach Collaros who played his best football as a Rough Rider against Calgary. And you got Chris Jones having figured out Bo Levi Mitchell. How history could have been rewritten in November 2018.
Would have been perfect.
Yeah, it would have been perfect. I kind of try and play the other side and think, well, can you beat Calgary 3 times in one season? That's pretty tough. But you're right. I mean, all he did was win football games, and they figured it out. And so it feels really, really good to see Zach Collaros healthy and having success. I just hope it continues.
Travis Kuntz writing in on the Facebook wall. He says, so if suspensions disqualify you, should Simoni be nominated then? Sorry if I'm repeating this already. Just tuned in. No, Travis, we haven't talked about that. It's perfect timing, and it's a great question. In my mind, it's different. Can you put Mick's comment back up here? I love that our viewers are debating amongst themselves their take on that. Oh, Mick deleted it. He said the difference between a discipline situation versus a PED. I think they are different situations. Andrew Harris was caught cheating. Simoni Lawrence was not. They're different infractions. Yes, they were both suspended, but different infractions. We're really splitting a hair here, but there is a difference.
Sorry, Derek, go ahead.
Well, there's a big difference. The big difference, I mean, whether the amount that was in the substance, that he got tested positive for, affected his play or not, and we can go back and forth about that. Well, it's not enough to really impact him, to make him faster, to make him better. But you said that he had a performance-enhancing drug in his system. You've said he was cheating. So that has to impact, and it has to kind of almost discredit what he had done on the field up until that point. Whether it actually had an effect or not, the suspension and saying he was guilty of it has to at least play a factor. And in that sense, then you kind of can't say that it was the best season up until that point because it was affected by a performance-enhancing drug.
And it's easy to dismiss the Simoni Lawrence suspension because it isn't in the same context. But if you look at it, I think you could turn it around and almost make an argument that should be looked upon differently because in the case of Andrew Harris, there were no consequences for anybody except Andrew Harris. Nobody got injured. Nobody got hurt. But if you're looking at the Simoni Lawrence situation, that was an injurious hit on June 13th that hurt another player and had consequences, or at least it seemed to have consequences at the time for another team. So in a way, leaving someone concussed with a late hit could be judged more harshly, or perhaps should be judged more harshly than a suspension along the lines of that which was received by Andrew Harris, but it just doesn't seem to resonate the same way.
It doesn't, and we don't have a Lady Byng trophy in the CFL, and if we did, he wouldn't be eligible for that one.
Right. Well, Andrew Harris is very much engaged, obviously, in this whole situation because he's part of it. We were talking in our pre-show meeting here that somebody wrote us on Twitter with Harris's stats since coming back from suspension, and they're not much different than pre-suspension. And Andrew liked that tweet. So, I mean, he's involved. He's watching what people are saying about him. And quite frankly, if he was on my team, I'd probably love him. It's very evident in Winnipeg. They all love Andrew Harris. He's a Winnipeg kid. He's a Bomber great, all-time leading rusher in Canadian Football League history. But he did cheat, unfortunately, and got caught. It's just a very sad situation all around for everybody. But as I was reading some of my notes this morning on another area. It's called CBT, if anybody knows what that is. It says you have to look at life the way it is, not the way you think that it should be. And that very much fits the situation here, I think, for Andrew Harris and all Winnipeg football fans. RV, before we let you go, did our curling guy show up? Is Kirk here? Not yet? Well, maybe RV's sticking around for another segment, but to end this
I'm
segment,
nice and comfortable here.
It's so comfortable.
If you want me
isn't
to continue to harm your
Isn't it
ratings, I will
nice?
happily do so.
It's so much fun in here. From Metal Shingle Guy, who's listening to our live audio feed at rodpeterson.com/listen live today, regarding this Saturday's game and Trevor Harris being sat down. And you did kind of cover this earlier, RV, but I'll ask you again. He says, don't count your chickens before they hatch. Eskimos are still a playoff team. Coming in here PO'd. Trap game if there ever was. You did bring this up, but I'll ask you to bring it up again. Riders now an 11-point favorite for the football game. Craig Dickinson's not going to allow them to look past Edmonton this Saturday, is he?
Craig Dickinson and the Rough Riders have been very good at that this year. And a few times during the season, I've written, okay, this is a bit of a trap game. Be careful here. And they tend to win the games against opponents that they should defeat. That was the big difference when Ken Austin came in 2007. If you look at the period 2003 to 2006, they had good teams that year, not great teams, and they didn't have home playoff games. Why? Because in 2003, the Riders were the only team to lose to the Hamilton Tiger Cats. In 2004, they lost 3 times to a Winnipeg team that won 7 games all season. 2005, they lost twice to an Ottawa Renegades team that was so successful that year that they promptly folded. And the following year, they couldn't beat an Edmonton Eskimos team that won 7 games. And in each case, it was the failure to win those games that prevented them from having a home playoff game and perhaps greater success. 2007, what happens? Ken Austin comes here. The overall performance of the team was elevated, and they started taking advantage of the supposed free spaces on the CFL's bingo card. And if there was a team that they played with an inferior record, they beat that team. And that tradition carried on when Ken Miller took over as the head coach. They started beating the teams they should beat. And I see the same traits from this Craig Dickinson team.
Awesome. And our curling guy is here. So, RV, we'll let you adjourn. Thank you, as always.
It's a great pleasure. Thanks so much, Rod. And I'm not sure whether to call you Kelly or Darren, but thanks for coloring your hair because I wasn't the, pardon me, grayest person on the panel today as a result.
DuPont dressed up as Kelly Rempel for Halloween.
And sorry for my chest cold.
You're all good. 100 Things Rough Riders fans should know and do before they die by Robert Vanstone, forward by David Ridgway. What do people need to know about where they can get it, RV?
Amazon, it'll be in Chapters Indigo very shortly, I'm told. It's at McNally Robinson in Saskatoon, so I hope people get it and enjoy it, and thank you for mentioning it again.
Curling Talk with Kirk Myers coming up next. It's the Rod Peterson Show on this Thursday morning.
You're watching Rod Peterson On Demand. For more of The Rod Peterson Show, visit rodpeterson.com or follow Rod Peterson on social media.